What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined, as always, by my spooky co-host, Dave Martinson. Dave, what's going on, man?
Spooky season in effect, sir. All this breaking news, fitting of the times. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Spooky season in effect, but also spooky, or Spooktober, I guess I should say, coming to a close. However, I did not celebrate Spooktober this year. I didn't have a Halloween costume. Did you?
I did, because I'm not a lame. And I was Cliff Booth from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And a compatriot was Rick Dolan, of course. You gotta do it for the content. This was a, do it for us kind of costume, not the most populous choice you could do. But fuck them, it was a good costume. So I was satisfied with my work.
A compatriot who will not be named on this podcast. I saw your costume, was very impressed. I thought you two did a great job with it. You said that people thought you were Starsky and Hutch, though.
They did. Yeah. Unforeseen circumstance. I just assumed people just wouldn't recognize it because they hadn't seen the movie. But apparently Starsky and Hutch, specifically the original iteration, very, very similar to Rick and Cliff in the promotional images. So
it's funny.
It's all good.
Something definitely unforeseen. But if you want to see everything Nowstalgia Pod has to offer you, subscribe on YouTube. You can also listen any way you want at soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod and follow us on Twitter at nostalgiapod for the non-audio content that we're churning out. Mostly just tweets, but maybe other stuff in the future. Who knows? We got a lot to talk about today. Jesus is King actually dropped, which, hey, imagine that. But we want to start with our very good boys, our former number one boys, Benioff and Weiss. They're regretfully stepping away from Star Wars for now, and it seems like for the future. They recently signed the deal with Netflix back in August, 5 years, $250 million, churning out movies and television for them. But they're pretty much assured, or they pretty much assured everybody that this would not conflict with their Star Wars output, that they didn't foresee this pushing it back at all. Just a mere 2 months later, they're stepping away. Dave, what do you make of this news from the Game of Thrones creators?
Yeah, not too shocked, to be honest, just because when that Netflix deal was signed, or at least the news was broke to the public, a lot of people remarked that it was kind of a lot of money as far as these overall deals that have been handed out ad nauseum by all the streamers recently. It's kind of a lot of money because Benioff and Weiss, despite showrunning the last monocultural show known to man, Game of Thrones, of course, they've never really worked on multiple projects at the same time the way other Netflix signees like Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy have. So it was a bit curious to expect them to turn out lots of different stuff, especially if one of those things happens to be something unrelated to Netflix, such as new Star Wars movies. So I think the writing was on the wall, at least a little bit. When the Netflix news dropped, they were saying that they were committed to doing at least one Star Wars movie. So it had already kind of been walked back from a full trilogy. Mm-hmm. And they were announced as the full trilogy, 2 years ago now, almost 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's been quite a while. But, once Kevin Feige joined the mix, as we discussed recently, it did seem like the waters were a little muddied, Feige doing at least one movie. Rian Johnson's movies have not been canned as far as we know. And Benioff and Weiss's movies, didn't seem to be much headway. So I'm not overly shocked. Honestly, I wonder how long ago this was actually decided. I'm sure Lucasfilm probably was with this call as soon as the Netflix deal became official.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Why they would release at this time, I guess, is a bit puzzling to me if this wasn't recent. I'm not sure how it lines up, especially with Mandalorian just dropping trailers. This was going to be big news regardless. So waiting, until they had maybe some trailers to stifle the noise of this sort of loss is something to consider. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but the question I kind of come back to, I guess, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, is does Star Wars as an intellectual property, as a television and movie churner of content, have a problem with working with some of the biggest directors of our time? J.J. Abrams has been a solid fill-in for them, and they seem to have a really good relationship with him. Ron Howard came in to save Lord and Miller from the Solo debacle, but Lord and Miller, Trevorrow, Trank, right, save. Maybe not the best word to piece something together, but yeah. Lord and Miller, Trevorrow, Trank. I mean, the list now includes Benioff and Weiss. What is it that's making these so difficult for these people to work with Star Wars after they've signed on to it?
Yeah, no one really got too bent out of shape once Josh Trank's untitled spin-off was canned. People thought maybe it was a Boba Fett movie. Who knows? Nor were people that concerned that Trevorrow was taken off episode 9, right? Trank had just had Fantastic Four reboot flop, and Trevorrow had followed up Jurassic World with The Book of Henry, another notorious flop. But then once the Lord Miller stuff happens, once Gareth Edwards needs to be severely fixed with Tony Gilroy on Rogue One, all that, it's an interesting question. Apparently there's talk of, or not even talk, report that Gilroy got back involved for the Catch and Andor Rogue One spinoff show, because again, they were having some issues in the writing room. So I think, I don't know, part of it probably is what kind of expectations Disney is set, because all of Hollywood has, I'm sure, amazing, really interesting pitches for things to do in the Star Wars sandbox. It just needs to be something that Lucasfilm and Disney want to actually make. And in terms of muddying the brand, we hope we're enthusiastic about the future of the movies getting more experimental and leaving Skywalkers behind, as we know. And until then, we have The Mandalorian, and how gritty is The Mandalorian actually going to be? The trailers, I think, are promising, but we don't know. So I think it's just Disney or Lucasfilm, however it's really being broken down, is just really controlling of the brand right now. Mm-hmm. So at least in the most mainstream of ways. Obviously, the comics and the games are getting a little more freaky, but yeah, it's weird. Obviously.
Yeah, it's just a strange thing, especially because the generation of filmmakers that are coming up now were people that obviously grew up with Star Wars as this major influence in their careers and their movie going lives, and it's definitely something that I think we'll be keeping our eye on as we move forward and we see who does get to take control of these series. And this hopefully trilogy that was planned or that they're working on or that they're developing, however far down the line it got. So definitely some interesting news. Why don't we move on to an interesting album, though, from Kanye West. Feels like just last year we were talking about him. That's because we were. When he released Ye, as well as produced a number of other records from Pusha T, Nas, Tiana Taylor, missing someone.
Kids See Ghosts as well.
Yes, Kids See Ghosts as well. And Jesus is King, originally conceptualized as Yandi.
Mm-hmm.
We heard some leaks. We talked about, we were fairly intrigued by those leaks, but I think we both were cautious to put much stock into them. And then it was supposed to drop back in September. It didn't. Comes out as a movie. People rushed to the theaters to watch a 30-minute Kanye West visual album.
Made $830,000 on only 372 IMAX screens this past weekend. Decent business.
not bad. Kanye West puts asses in the seats, man. But I guess where maybe we should start is, Dave, is this a good Kanye West album? seen a lot of buzz online going both directions.
Oh man. I mean, this was the case even before Kanye was off the reservation, but man, whenever he does anything musically, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has one. It's so nauseating, especially because most of them aren't interesting or detailed, or the homework isn't done. Yada yada. Yeah, I think it's a good gospel adjacent record in terms of the Kanye West standards. You know, I still have it pretty low. I think it's better than Ye. It's funny. The mix is still not perfect on this, but the production, I think, overall is pretty impressive, pretty good.
Yep.
And it's just much more interesting and conceptual than Ye. I think it's kind of obvious. But I wouldn't really hold it up to anything else after that in his discography. But he's never tried to do anything like this before either. So it's kind of in its own little left field ballpark.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's conceptually unique, but still draws on a lot of his sound from past albums. You can really hear on specific tracks, you know, how they could have fit into Graduation or One Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, even with Use This Gospel. I thought Water could have very much been a track off Ye, if you wanted to. So there's a lot of influence there, but this is certainly unique for Kanye. And I agree. I think, yeah, I texted you this earlier and I said, this album makes me do the Alonzo Mourning gif where he's like shaking his head, then nodding his head like, you know, throughout, because there were, as much as like there were things I was like cringing at or I found just to be overall just not good, there were some things I was like, man, that is a really awesome piece of production, a really awesome flourish to this song. I mean, getting Clips and then Kenny G on a track is just like fucking inspiring, you know. And I wish every Kanye song ended in a Kenny G solo now, which is you know, someone go back and make that remix for me for all the tracks. But yeah, overall, I think it's interesting, especially because it got delayed for so long, and then to feel this unfinished at parts is just like, are we ever gonna feel like there's a Kanye album that's finished when it comes out again? It's a question I don't know if we'll have an answer to, but
no, yeah, exactly, because we just did this with Ye, where Ye was a whole second body of work, and it replaced something that had been basically done like a week prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these Wyoming sessions, he's still doing those when he's not, you know, Calabasas, and he's just such a tinkerer. But now he just will never finish anything. And you know, leading up to this, while this Jesus King was delayed a few weeks, a lot of it was just based off mixing, right? He just wants to remix, remaster everything he's doing. I think Nicki told Genius that she redid her new body feature like 3 different times, like different ways and stuff. And then what happens? It doesn't even make the album.
Fucking
personally, that was my favorite of the Yandhi leaks. I've since downloaded the bootleg, or have I? And I'm disappointed it's not out there legitimately. But that's just how he is, you know. He's just gonna change his mind at the you know, tilt of a hat. But yeah, getting Kenny G, getting Malice to come back and reunite with Pusha. I mean, that's just who Kanye is, the way you can bring collaborators together. And it's funny, you know, I always wonder, like, who's the muse on Kanye's album? You know, I mean, Dark Twisted Fantasy, you know, that's when we get the Bon Iver introduction, right? Cuddy back on 808s, and Chief Keef shows up on Yeezus, and there's always like some young up and coming thing he's trying to jack or come in. I don't know if he had one this time, but Ant Clemens is all over this track list more than anyone else. So that's at least someone I'll be watching. And like that, on one of those tracks, Everything We Need with Ty Dolla $ign, that was, of course, on the leaks. That was, what was that? Before the Storm. That was the one that had an XXX feature. And obviously that feature's no longer here. But yeah, when we really hadn't heard anything else. But I was struck with just how gospel-y it actually was. You know, Kanye has been never shy about his faith, and you know, whether you believe it, it's truly something he feels or not, it's always been part of him, right? Obviously, his first solo single is literally Jesus Walks, and the God imagery has been there from the get-go. Again, one of the albums is called Jesus, so he actually found a way to take it to the next level. And I don't know, I do finally feel like it's kind of sincere, like him trying to be like this megalomaniacal, like egomaniac Joel Osteen for the wealthy. I don't know. It's like it does track with what I know how Kanye is these days.
It's
And
pretty
even
funny.
yeah,
Sorry, it's pretty funny to hear you compare someone wanting to be Joel Osteen as sincere. Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, like, I don't know, man. I guess it's hard to feel like this is. I think in Kanye's mind, this is sincere. I think he feels like he's actually like trying to deliver a message and trying to, bring people towards his beliefs and spirituality and lead them and to be inspired in ways. But it's hard to take that from the guy who is wearing the MAGA hats, who's going out there and basically backing somebody who is who doesn't love everybody, who doesn't even approach people, every person as a person. So it's just hard to be like delivering this message while also kind of living the public persona that he has. And I think it just kind of highlights the inner turmoil for Kanye, but we didn't get the inner turmoil of like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is using that pain to inspire things. It's him almost like neglecting how much turmoil he's in, and saying like, oh, I found this path. And I guess that in some ways made it harder for me to connect with some of the songs and some of the messages, but overall, I think that there's a lot more that I like on this record than I dislike. Like we already talked about Use This Gospel. That song is fucking awesome. But I know a song that you like a lot is Follow God.
Yeah, that's the thing. So follow. I mean, a lot of like the press, the absurdity of Kanye's persona right now. What was it? He suddenly has a problem with the way Kim dresses. Okay, and he doesn't want his collaborators to be engaging in premarital sex while he's working with them. Again, of all people for this to come from, it's really rich. Remember that Struggle Bar song he had like a year ago where he was talking about how he kind of wanted to smash Kylie and Courtney and all them.
All four of them.
Right. Yeah. Okay, fine. Maybe you've totally changed the way you feel. Let's see if it lasts. Let's just say we're skeptical. But yeah, Follow God's funny because a lot of the lyrical content on Follow God is just kind of more like traditional Ye, like, and like and traditional Ye today is not as woke or thoughtful as he thinks it is, right? Like, I was looking at the gram and I don't even like likes, deep shit right there. And like, yeah, I think like him talk like I was screaming at my dad. He told me it ain't Christ-like. He's actually talked about that story, I believe, with on Big Boy's Neighborhood, the radio show. And I think there's actually a lot of like interesting little like one-liners on this track. But overall, because it's like clearly the most traditional rap song on there, I just like it more. I think it's a really good beat, and I actually enjoy that flow. And flipping the whole truth sample, keeping that Father Stretch My Hands motif he's been rolling with. I don't know. I think that song's just kind of fun to listen to, and I believe it is currently the number one track on Spotify for Kanye right now. It's up to 19 million listens, almost 20. So I think that does track just because it's the easiest song to listen to. But in a sense, it doesn't really fit most of the other album. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What'd you think? Because I think overall, this album sounded pretty congruent. Songs like Selah and Water and On God. I don't know. I feel like overall the motif was kind of present, and I guess Follow God, which is a pretty short track, almost felt like a bit of an outlier.
Yeah. I mean, I think that song definitely stood out, but it felt like something that we could have heard on the back of Pablo. How the backside didn't really feel like it was totally rolled together, but a lot of it just really jumped out. Water, I thought sounded great. Selah, I wasn't as big of a fan of, but I really liked On God, even if it maybe didn't catch me lyrically. I like the sound of it. It sounded like something that could have been on Graduation, which, when Graduation came out, it was just like mind blowing to hear like the way he was like producing things and using like the different sounds together. But probably the song I keep coming back to the most, in a good way and a bad way, is God Is. Because, I tweeted about how his take, and he's like basically making this plea to God to like save him and protect him. And he pleads so much, his voice basically gets like hoarse, and it's a little off-putting to me. But at the same time, the production, the second half of that song is just phenomenal, and the way he uses those like woo, he's like woo woo like in the background. I just wish he had a better vocal sample on it, and he chose not to like go hoarse during the song, because I think that woo background is one of like the most electric moments on the track, and just really elevates the song to me. Any other songs that stood out?
No, that's it. It's funny, the track with Clips and Kenny G, it's getting a lot of love, and the Kenny G solo at the end in particular, I think, is a pretty triumphant moment. But actually, I think that's one of the weaker beats, to be honest. And Clips probably could have sounded even better if that beat was a little more amenable to how they go. But, it's, again, this is a 27-minute album. Ye was also around this length. This time, because the motif is so much more obviously present, an impression is still left with a short runtime. I think goes a long way. Kanye usually has made much longer tracks and longer albums, but this is the new Ye. And yeah, the lyrics are not as strong as they used to be. I think they've just kind of accepted that. That's been the case, frankly, since Pablo, right? Like he's just kind of he's in a new stage. He's a late career guy, and I mean, also there's not a whole lot of precedent for rappers having great success in their 40s, apart from like Jay-Z. So I guess it comes with the territory. But yeah, I'm not going to run a lot of this back just because the gospel stuff inherently is not, my bag per se, but it's a lot better than I expected. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, considering once we knew the gospel shit was really what we were getting.
Yeah, kind of crazy. This is where we're at with Kanye, though, where we're like, pleasantly surprised by this album.
Right.
Would not have expected we would be here 10 years ago. Quick question for you. Kanye said he's going to start touring pretty quickly. You going to be in?
Yeah, I'll be in for sure. Apparently, he'll be still playing some of the old hits and perhaps sanitizing the lyrics. Obviously, he has a lot of explicit lyrics in the past, so that's just interesting to see if that holds. But yeah, I mean, last time he was on tour, the St. Pablo tour, he canceled it before my date came up, so I didn't get to see that. Which means the last time I saw him was at the Meadows right after the Yeezus tour, so it's been quite a while. And let's hope he can finish the tour this time. Obviously, he has a lot of issues with his, ability to handle that now, so seems like he'd be dedicated. The Sunday service live performances seems to have reinvigorated how he likes to do that. So if we get a Sunday service tour of sorts, there's worse things to pay money to see, right?
For sure. Yeah, I definitely will be in too. It'll be interesting to see if he does sanitize the lyrics, how pretty much any song off My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is handled. Runaway in particular, can't imagine him doing a Kanye concert without Runaway, and that chorus might just
butthole.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Buttholes. The Deuce. David Simon, series finale last night on HBO. David Simon, obviously the creator of The Deuce, as well as The Wire, Show Me a Hero, Generation Kill, among others. Dave, why don't we give our overall thoughts on season 3 and then the show as a whole? Because I think that this is one of the shows we've been with start to finish that we've been able to kind of talk about, and I think it's interesting to see the 3 different variations of the show and how Simon kind of tied them all together at the end. I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think that was made abundantly clear as this season started to wrap up. Actually, how it started is that The Deuce, apparently from the beginning, was a 3-season arc with 3 distinct stories. I mean, broadly, we go from prostitution to porn to the AIDS crisis, the modernization of New York City, right? Just seeing how Times Square changed. Again, this is all rooted in real life. How Times Square changed over. I mean, what's the show's past? About 15 years of time. We're in like 85 by the end of
Something like
this.
that, yeah.
Start in the 70s. Seeing that change and seeing how all these different characters with their various storylines that are all serving the greater Simon theme about urban decay and crime and vice and how that affects people and the larger system. It's just done really well. And it's funny because this is a show that has way less plot than something like The Wire, which is really famous for having so much plot and being so, I think, easy to enjoy in that regard. But The Deuce is almost like anti-fan service, and it's so dedicated to serving those themes. And I think ultimately doing justice to its characters, at least the ones that get the best stories. That is just really impressive. And I mean, it's only like 20, it's less than 30 episodes total. And it's never like a huge ratings hit. But I think the legacy of the show is just that this overall arc that it goes on. And season 3, I think is the strongest season, just because you get a lot of great payoff that's been coming for so long that I found it incredibly satisfying. What about you?
Yeah, I thought season 3 was very satisfying. I thought it was a really fun watch. And I thought it was also interesting how they were able to take this 5-year jump and be able to put some characters in the same spots and some characters very much far ahead from where they were, a major development in their own arc as characters. And, like someone like Lori in this season, even though she's this famous porn star, very much kind of stuck within her own issue still and still trying to like make something of herself. Frankie, another character who throughout the season very much just stuck being the same kind of character, whereas the ones who were able to, I think, be more internal, be more I don't know, retrospective or inflective of their own choices, their own life, where they want to go, what they actually want to accomplish, were the characters that you saw take steps, make something of themselves, be able to have a different future than the one that it seemed like they were kind of doomed to. So I thought that was something Simon did well. And obviously there's the typical Simon touches, where you have this big story with all these characters, and that can be a challenge for almost any other showrunner or director to manage, and he just juggles it and interweaves it so well. It's so impressive the way he builds worlds, the way he builds characters out. I mean, even someone I forgot his name. It's the guy that plays Lenny Bruce and Maisel.
Luke Kirby.
Yes, Luke Kirby. He gets maybe 3 scenes this season for his personal life, and it's mostly related to him and his wife's relationship and how he's a closeted gay. And I think it does so much with so little to build out that character and just how much impact that had on him and his family. It's really impressive. So I think The Deuce might go down as one of the most probably underrated and shows of this era of TV, because like you said, it's never a ratings darling, but I think just a masterclass in terms of how you tell a story. So what moments from season 3 really stood out to you?
Well, I think overall, I think the best characters in season 3 would be Lori and Eileen / Candy, probably. And they've gotten significant screen time throughout the whole show. And Lori in particular, obviously she's at the forefront of Cece in the first 2 seasons. And we obviously really enjoyed Gary Carr's performance, even if Cece was a really detestable person. Obviously, he was not in this season because he's already dead. But seeing Lori continue to have, I think, really fulfilling arc, and even if it doesn't have a happy ending, it's just really well drawn. I think Emily Mee in particular, who I only known from her brief appearances on The Leftovers, really, really does a lot. And I think that's probably the character that Simon really, I think, did a lot of work to build up. It was obvious that Maggie Gyllenhaal was a producer on the show. she was never going to be Candy and do some nudity if the character was not going to have some grander, ambition. And if, sure enough, as she becomes a director and activist in a certain sense, that becomes obvious. But Lori, I think, is probably like the best aspect of the show, just because that arc, I think, that could have gone sideways or could have been less special. So I was really impressed with that, and obviously, not great to watch her go out the way she did, but I think those are my two favorite arcs for sure.
Yeah, Lori's the real tragedy of the story. She's the one that kind of gets eaten alive by this world, whereas you see characters like Abby or Candy, like you talked about, be able to like make something of themselves. How did you feel about Vince and Frankie? I think Franco, when he was first attached to this and going to be playing twins, it was probably the most publicity that the show got heading into its premiere. And then I think it was pulled off to varying levels of effectiveness throughout.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was an unnecessary gimmick, especially considering Frankie Martino didn't change throughout most of the show. He's relatively one note as a person, and in a sense, his story ended the way it always would. I think that was done well. Maybe not the most unique character in a Simon show, a little familiar, but that was done well. But it didn't need to be Franco, right? And obviously, with the allegations of misconduct and the way Franco had carried himself at that acting school, the way he was directing. The optics were not great that Franco stayed on with the show, playing two different characters, and even directed an episode or two this season. I think Simon's a very progressive guy that really does, practice what he preaches and whatnot. And, I think unforced error. At the same time, HBO said that nothing bad had happened on their experience with him on the Deuce. So kind of complicated considering nothing criminal ever happened to Franco. I think there's a civil suit now. But yeah, in terms of the characters, I think I always liked Vince more. And you think when you start watching the show that he's going to be like an A1 lead.
Right.
And he really just ends up fading into the stacked ensemble the way a lot of Simon ensembles go. So yeah, in a sense, against the extra Franco-ness of it all, it might not have been worth it. But I mean, they were good performances, and it was pretty impressive towards the end, the way they did the effects with them sharing scenes.
Yeah, for sure. I did feel like the scene where Frankie dies just felt very flat for me. I don't know if it was just that I didn't really care for Frankie much or what, but something about that scene just didn't hit me the way I kind of expected.
Yeah, it just felt, as soon as Pasquale came onto the show, you just felt like, all right, here's the guy that's going to kill Frankie.
Yep.
It felt a little obvious, felt a little self-serving to the story in terms of getting rid of him. That's fine. I think it still works. But yeah, I think you're right. It's not the most warm, feel that great seeing it happen, or feel that bad. I think having Mike come down with AIDS, though, that even though Mike is definitely an ancillary character, that definitely, I think, hit me a lot harder, and obviously all the stuff. Yep. The stuff with Paul, the specter of AIDS was really over the show since season 2, but really seeing the way that plays out in this show, and Simon never like defers to like grief porn or anything, right? It's more about like people using the opportunity to make up for lost time and missed connections and, reconnecting with the past. That's kind of a common theme this season. So yeah, I like that focus more. And Frankie, if Frankie had left the show a season ago, nothing probably would have changed, right?
No, I don't think so. Someone that I was really impressed with was Chris Coy, who played Paul on the show. I thought Paul, especially the episode where he calls Todd's parents in, and as Todd is at the end stages of dealing with HIV. I thought he was just incredibly strong in that episode, and the way that he played such a delicate moment in this story, and kind of portraying the effects that this disease had on this community, on the people during this time. I thought he just absolutely killed it. And also shout out to Chris Bauer, who played Bobby, and just like, fuck Bobby, man. Like, I hated that guy throughout. He's such a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I don't know, just a really like not great person. Although I did like how he handled getting what was his name out of jail?
Black Frankie.
Yes, Black Frankie out of jail. Thought that was great.
Yeah, Black Frankie remained Black Frankie once White Frankie died. The old habits, I guess. But that was funny. Fits those guys though. How that would go. Yeah, his son Joey. I actually like that little detail of him growing up a little bit as the show progressed, then getting involved with Wall Street and bringing that in, little shades of Wolf of Wall Street antics, right? Also, didn't actually realize this. Joey's played by Gandolfini's son. Cool little cameo of sorts. How'd you feel about
not know that?
Yeah. I didn't know until I looked it up. How'd you feel about Frankie Longo and Rudy Pipolo, and how that the mob aspect of the show fizzled out? You know, I mean, I like that like mob bar setting we got a few times. That was very classic. You know, they all look like Italian ass mobsters. A little cliche, but that was funny. But how'd you feel about that? Like Rudy going out as the more ruthless, like Gotti mobsters are coming in. You know, definitely like a changing of the guard. That been building up for a while.
You know, it really surprised me. I did when I saw him walking around the car, and the way that they were talking that scene. I thought for sure it was going to be the other way around in terms of who killed who. But you know, I think it made sense the way it went down, and did embody like you said, the changing of the guard, so to speak. And you know, it reminded me a bit of a lot of the deaths in The Wire. I know you haven't seen it, but a lot of times there would be people in cars, and it would be like a youngin from the crew that they're in, or the gang that they're in, who would be sneaking up on you know, an elder in the crew, and just kind of, you know, establishing themselves as the new person in that spot. So I thought that was also kind of like a nice like nod to some of the Wire type stuff. I don't know. Overall, I think this show is just, there's so much to like and so much to dig into, and it's around such a topic that you would just never, I think, expect to really see given this much time and this much detail. And that's really what Simon does best, man. Is he takes these stories that I think people either struggle to tell to the depth that he does, or don't touch, and he really brings them to life. And I'm actually gonna miss the Deuce a little bit. I had to do some catching up prior to recording today, but it was just a really great watch. I was riveted.
Yeah, man. It's again, really satisfying show. Really happy that we stuck with it, and I think everyone who did stuck with it was very satisfied and happy with the show. Everyone seems to evangelize for it that does watch it. But as we mentioned before, Simon will be back in short order. He's already filmed a Plot Against America miniseries based off the famous Philip Roth novel. It's already been shot, so we'll get that in the new year. So Simon will, of course, be back on HBO soon enough. But yeah, the Deuce, you know, I'd rather leave too early than leave too late. So I think Simon Pellicano's handled it really well. So really satisfying.
Why don't we move on to Netflix? From HBO to Netflix. Dolemite Is My Name. Craig Brewer's new film about starring Eddie Murphy, about Rudy Ray Moore, who created the character of Dolemite, and who was a real person that did stand-up comedy and blaxploitation films back in the 60s, I believe it was 60s, 70s.
The stories, the movies about the making of the movie Dolemite, which came out in 1975. So yeah, late 60s and 70s is where the story takes place. And
what this was gaining most of its attention from is Eddie Murphy's return to screen for the first time in 3 years. The last time was it Dreamgirls? What was it?
Well, yeah, the last time he was back of any consequence was Dreamgirls, and that was way back in 2006. This is his first R-rated movie since Life back in 1999. So yeah, it's been a while that Eddie was in the mainstream consciousness in a respectable way, you know. And I think ever since this premiered at TIFF, the buzz was that Eddie wants that Best Actor, and sure enough, he's been running. He's been at all the early awards and stuff, and he is really fantastic. And the movie does a great job of both, I guess, honoring someone like Rudy Ray Moore, who is probably not as famous as he deserves to be. He, of course, always remarks in the movie about how he didn't look like Billy D. Williams, and he wasn't good enough to make Shaft, right? And a lot of good references at the time, but still a really talented and impressive entertainer. Meanwhile, the movie's flipping that and also kind of just showcasing Eddie Murphy, who, as everyone knows, was the star of stars in the 80s, but has since, receded as he just became so fucking famous. So I really enjoyed the movie, despite not knowing anything about Rudy Ray Moore. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought Eddie Murphy was just phenomenal. The way that he kind of jumped in and out of being the character of Dolemite and like the person Rudy Ray Moore, I thought was really impressive. And he brings a weight to the character that I think is essential in telling the story. Because if it was just about, this is just like, we're going to let Eddie Murphy be Dolemite, like, all right, whatever. Like, I feel like that would have just kind of fallen back into the same type of films that Eddie's gotten panned for, for doing.
Norbit.
Right, exactly. But showing his acting chops off and really sinking into like the struggle and this person's desire to be famous and to be successful and to keep moving through these challenges of getting this story made. Just really, really impressive. And the cast is just deep. I mean, Eddie Murphy, Keegan-Michael Key, Mike Epps, Craig Robinson, Tituss Burgess, Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes fucking awesome in this, man. So good. Divine Joy Randolph, T.I., Chris Rock. I mean, we're really getting down the bench at that point. Yep. Yeah. Just really, really a delight to watch. A lot of really funny moments. What moments or what about the movie stood out most to you?
Yeah, I think right away it really is a really striking period setting. That's the 60s, 70s, down to the fashion, the dialogue. It felt really accurate to the time in terms of it's a movie that's obviously unapologetically black, largely black cast about, black people, but it is still rooted in that time. And, I think was really effective scene was when Rudy and crew go see, what was it? Gene Wilder movie, I think it was, in theater. And like, man, there's no brothers on screen. There's nobody else like us watching in the theater. We gotta make some pictures too. I think it was really smart of rooting what it was like to be a black entertainer at that time into the story effectively. And I mean, that wasn't really an easy task because, as you said, when Eddie's in the Dolemite character, Rudy Ray Moore, Dolemite, was famous for being so crass and really pushing the lines and not worrying about being palatable to traditional white audiences, right? So I think it really does kind of ride that line really effectively, which is, again, funny to say because the movie is a traditional biopic in a certain sense that's really balls to the wall. Like, there's a lot of nudity in this. There's a lot of ridiculous jokes, just hilarious scenes. I think the whole thing where Snipes, who plays Derville Martin, when he actually acts and like commits to finishing the movie, and like he's like talking with the fake intestines hanging out of him, and then just like leaves the set with them and shit. And like, it's it was always really committed to what it wanted to be the whole time. I was actually surprised. I kind of, not knowing the story, I thought Ron Cephas Jones, given that he's obviously a really esteemed actor, I thought his like hobo character, bum character, would come back into play and accuse Rudy of stealing his stuff. I guess it's a bit of a red herring. That was effective to me. I also enjoyed Ti's moments just because it was very off type, unlike Ti's past acting. So that was enjoyable. But yeah, overall, it's just really, I think it's a really crowd pleasing movie, and just seeing someone like Snipes, who also is making a bit of a comeback. Just really fun the whole time.
Yeah, it's incredibly fun. It's I think slightly affecting emotionally, but really I think the way that it's structured, having to overcome all these challenges, empowering characters, I think that was probably the moments that got me the most emotionally, was when Dolemite would be talking with like the girl who sang on stage, and who he brings along with him, Divine Joy Randolph. Right. And I think those moments when, or when he talks with his aunt and things like that, those moments where you see him like being a human, being silly, being goofy, lifting people up, was what really got to me there. So definitely a film I would recommend people to watch. And Craig Brewer going to be directing Coming to America, so the follow-up next year. So I think we'll get to see him working with Eddie a little bit more.
Yeah, that's exciting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 97% Rotten Tomatoes. You think Eddie Murphy gets Best Actor nom for this?
I think he's definitely on the short list, and I mean, the larger short list is, as we've said before, a lot already incredibly stacked with famous, already accomplished actors. But I think he's close. I mean, that top 5. We'll see how the rest of the season goes, but I think he's right there, and he's trying. He'll be on SNL soon, both as the. Is he hosting and the musical guest somehow, or is he just hosting?
No, you're just hosting, right? Yeah, Chance was the hosting.
I think of Harry Styles who's doing that. That's right. But yeah, Eddie Murphy come back to SNL first time in like 40 years, right? Mm-hmm. And again, he's just been at all the awards stuff so far. So we'll see, but he's going to be at the finish line, I think.
Moving on to Jojo Rabbit, not on streaming services. Saw this in the theater. Taika Waititi telling this story about little Jojo, a Nazi youth at the end of World War II, who has an imaginary friend. That imaginary friend is Hitler, played by Taika Waititi, and about his escapades as he finds out his mother is hiding a secret within his house. You can find most of this in the trailers. This is fairly non-spoilery at this point. We are going to be getting into spoilers with this, but maybe just giving a general, your general thoughts on Jojo Rabbit as a movie, sitting at 70% Rotten Tomatoes right now, and then we'll dive a little bit more into the details.
Yeah, Jojo Rabbit. I enjoyed it. And I think it's good and pretty effective considering all the lines and themes it's juggling. But I also felt like I wanted more from the movie once it ended. But I think it's a very interesting movie to discuss for a lot of reasons. But how did you feel about it?
I actually really enjoyed this movie. I thought, going into it, I was a little bit worried because I do think there's a lot of themes, a lot of things that it was hoping to touch on, and I was like, is this going to be able to deliver in all these areas? And I think if you go in expecting a comedy, a film that's going to satire, not Nazism and the ideologies attached to that, specific to World War II, and that is going to kind of leave you feeling good at parts, and actually helping or making you feel not so good at probably at more parts, then you get exactly what you were looking for. And that's the thing, is I think because I went in worried, I came out pleasantly surprised, whereas it sounds like maybe you had higher expectations that the movie didn't totally deliver on.
Yeah, I think ultimately I was expecting more of like a comment or I don't want to say like a take. It's comedic. It's obviously satirizing hate and Nazism. It's billed as an anti-hate satire, right? That's great job on the marketers on that one. But like I think the expectations are set, but just watching it, I just felt like overall the stuff with Scarlett Johansson I think is pretty good in the movie as JoJo's mom. Well, I thought the scene with her when he finds her for the last time, I thought that was pretty effective and like a good emotional beat, and probably even better than a lot of the humor in a certain sense. I don't know. I was waiting for some kind of payoff with the movie that I just didn't feel like I got, which is funny because I was entertained the whole time and enjoyed most of the humor, which is funny because a lot. It's funny. I think didn't expect this, but most of the humor is actually at the expense of Jews, not Nazis. Given that we're seeing lots of Nazi characters, and a lot of times over the top, really lampooning anti-Semitism, right? Like the Jews have their horns and their scales and all this nonsense shit, right? Mm-hmm. And seeing that espouse from little kids in particular is just pretty amusing, of course. But by the end, I just felt a little lacking. I think part of it is probably because Thomasin McKenzie, who obviously really broke out last year and Leave No Trace. She's the Jew in the attic hiding, the Anne Frank character. She doesn't really come across to JoJo or the audience as a Jewish person. We're just told she's Jewish, and I guess there's no like other side to what the Jews are in the movie. So she was just kind of there to be like the thing to get JoJo to grow up a little bit and change his fanaticism. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's still really funny, but I just didn't think it was as smart as I expected it to be. Let's say that.
So it sounds like you felt like Thomasin McKenzie's Elsa was like a character development MacGuffin, so to speak, but didn't stand alone as like a fully developed character. And I think I agree with that. I think they definitely could have built her out more. However, I almost feel like the point you made where it's like, she didn't necessarily, like, we're just told she's Jewish, but nothing else about her character would necessarily indicate that to you, is almost kind of the point. I think that she was trying to get across to JoJo that, your internalized image of these people that you've been fed and brainwashed with it's not real. And when you really break it down, what's the difference between us other than our ideologies on religion and spirituality? So I think that can go both ways, but I do agree that Elsa as a character, I think I was left wanting to just see a little bit more, to feel like they had put a little bit more thought into that, and the role she could have played. I also think because of where her character's at, she plays a very like reserved emotional role, even though she's been through a lot of trauma. And I wish they had given her a little bit more space, because I don't think it's a female character issue. I thought Scarlett Johansson as a female character in this was phenomenal. Maybe my favorite Scarlett Johansson performance ever. Probably since Her, and that's a vocal performance exclusively. But Thomasin McKenzie was, I think, a little bit handcuffed by how she was written in this. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's interesting just because overall the movie has a very lighthearted tone. It's quite cartoonish in spots. Obviously, Taika Waititi plays Adolf Hitler, who's JoJo's imaginary friend. It's inherently a little fantastical, but it might be off-putting to see such a lighthearted attitude around the Third Reich, And even though this is 1945, they're at the end. They're about to lose, right? The Eastern European theater is about to close, but still, I don't know, the evil, even if it's supposed to be in a making fun of way, don't know if we totally got that so much. Like Sam Rockwell, who loves to play shitty guys, as he continues to prove. Sam Rockwell is really likable as
really likable,
disgraced like Nazi stormtrooper who keeps getting demoted due to his incompetence, I suppose. Like, he's really enjoyable, and I think some people might grapple with that, like liking a Nazi. That's just the way he's portrayed. And in the beginning of the movie, Taika's portrayal of Hitler is also, I think, really enjoyable, just because he delivers a lot of the best jokes in the first act and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know if we totally grappled with that by the end. Like the whole like fuck you Hitler, and he kicks him out the window or whatever it is. It's like I feel like we just kind of like waved it all away. Everything's okay now. And again, it's a lighthearted movie, but I don't know. I just think those like more serious themes are just kind of touched on in the movie, and we never fully get through to them. And it's still okay. I think the movie still works. The movie's still really enjoyable the whole time. That's something that kind of just left me a little disappointed, just because I was expecting to get that at least in a different way. What I was not expecting was to like Archie Yates, who plays Yorkie so much.
Good.
My God, this adorable little kid who is just hilarious. I think at every scene he's in, just an incredible scene stealer. I was very impressed with him. I also really enjoyed Stephen Merchant, who plays a Gestapo leader.
Yeah. I think the criticism about the Nazis really comes, and them almost being too likable, comes with Stephen Merchant's Gestapo character.
Mm-hmm.
Because those guys are supposed to be super intimidating, and you do have an air of like anxiety when they're on screen, but to like introduce them with Stephen Merchant, who's like this tall, goofy dude, and then you do the 5 Hell Hitlers every single time they address each other. Just like it sets them off on such a silly way. Right. It's like hard to really feel the menacing and how bad of a dude they are. Even like Rebel Wilson, who is still this like brainwashed helper of Captain Klenzendorf. It's like she plays such a dweeb and brainwashed idiot. It's like, okay, I can't really hate you because you're so absurd. I think Alfie Allen's character and Sam Rockwell's character, I feel like it's okay to like them because they're obviously like working as like double agents at this point for to protect the Jewish people in the city, or try to have some resistance against the Nazis. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that maybe the Nazis could have been renounced a little bit more. But I think overall it comes back to, this is a story not necessarily about that time, but about this boy, right? And kind of finding ways to be more critical in terms of his thought, and not just wanting to be like everybody else, but embracing his differences. And I think he does that through Elsa as his like avatar, in a sense, like her helping him expand his mind and really explore his beliefs. And yeah, I think all the other characters though could have been drawn a little bit tighter. Are kind of bring about the absurdity of one view, and the criticalness of where is really the difference between everybody here.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, I think they kind of go back to like when Jojo keeps asking about details about the Jewish people, and Rockwell is like, the Jews? Are you still asking about that? Like he's just totally unconcerned, right? And like, it's such a quick moment to like dismiss the notion, and really funny as it comes up. But again, feel like a little bit of hand waving. It's funny because like, there's a really good piece by Cam Collins of Vanity Fair about Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which obviously is really the fairly famous satirization of Hitler. And of course, that's also well known because that was made before World War II really began. Like, that was shot in like 1939, like the invasion of Poland's like just happening when they're making that movie. So like we've kind of already like accomplished this in a certain sense.
Right.
And like, I don't want to like be like too much of a stickler. Like, everyone knows Nazis are bad, at least anyone who matters, right? So you don't need to, I guess, wave the flags and be like, bad Jews, okay. Like, you don't have to be so obvious, but the whole like thing build up to the movie, and I guess Disney's apprehension about the movie, because this was a Fox Searchlight movie that they inherited, just left me with expectations that this movie was going to be either more pervasive, more controversial, or just have like some greater themes. And it's almost like way more down the middle than I expected. You know, like I didn't think anything was super egregious, right? Like,
I don't think so.
It's not like so. It's just it just caught me off guard, I guess. You know,
what were your favorite scenes, moments, other than Yorkie obviously stealing the show?
Let's see. Early on, I really liked the Hitler Youth training exercises,
summer camp, basically.
Yeah, that was really good for multiple reasons. Really highlights the inherent sexism of the regime, the fanaticism to the bitter end, all that. That was good. I really liked the metal collection in their like robot suits. That was really funny. I mean, yeah, the ScarJo stuff is. I think I agree. This is Scar one of her best roles, and apparently another one of her best roles in Marriage Story is coming up soon. We'll talk about that soon.
Heater. Yeah.
It's weird because like Scarlett Johansson is just so famous that like you can't help but see ScarJo when you're watching her, but she's also inherently so talented that she makes that work. And it's almost a really understated role. It's not that showy, and all those scenes are good, but for some reason the payoff didn't totally land for me. But yeah, I mean, I liked Thomas and Mackenzie and JoJo's Elsa and JoJo's conversations when she's like in the cupboard and stuff, right? And like fake letters and all that. I think that all really works, and it's really sweet. But and again, I think all the early scenes with Hitler really work too, just because those are good punchlines.
Yeah, and it's a nice touch at the end when he does the "fuck you Hitler" line, where Hitler has the blood on the side of his head.
Yes, already dead.
I thought that was pretty good touch. Yeah, I thought Scarlett Johansson, that scene where, you know, Alfie's feeling her out, trying to get her to admit that she's hiding Jews. He brings up her dad, or his dad not being around, and she puts the soot on her face and plays the role of the dad and herself. I thought was pretty effective, and I thought just in general how they built up that relationship was really good. I loved how there was running gag of how hideous Jojo was now that he was like deformed and just he had like that little scar on his face you could barely see.
Can't even look at you anymore.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Also, everything between Sam Rockwell and Alfie Allen and Rebel Wilson, I just was like in stitches at. I thought they were fantastic. So a lot of good stuff there, and of course Taika as Hitler, like you said in the beginning, I thought was really, really effective. So for as much as maybe the movie didn't meet what we all were hoping it would, I think you a little bit more than myself, I still think this is a movie people should go see, support it, and give Taika more material to work with. Let him cook.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Taika has been trying to make this for a while. It's an adaptation of, I believe, Caging Skies, the novel or short story, and he'd been trying to make this for a while. And I think, in a certain sense, the Thor Ragnarok's massive success kind of got him the last requisite financial clout he required to make this movie, even though he was already a successful filmmaker before Marvel. So, you know, a lot of Marvel talk these days. That's a positive. You know, this movie was only on 55 screens last week. It's kind of funny we both were able to see it. I made $1 million, but I'm curious to see just how big this goes, because this won the audience award at TIFF, and I think it's really going to be a crowd-pleasing film. So I'm just curious quite how much this gets exposed. You know, how will Fox Searchlight really ride this movie and really kind of platform that release and get that out there? Obviously, we don't know yet, but it's kind of like Joker. It's something a little off color that you think can really resonate with people. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. I think adapted screenplay is probably in this movie's future. ScarJo maybe for best supporting. Again, she has another movie to consider there, but we'll be talking about the movie in the future. That's for sure.
To your point, 70% critic meter, 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So people that see it like it. We're gonna wrap up there. Talked about a lot of big stuff this week. And Dave, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Yeah, a lot of stuff is coming out this Friday. We won't talk about all of it, but Gangstar, first album in 16 years, DJ Premier, perhaps the best producer ever. Excited for that. I've liked the first two singles, so that was definitely talking about that. His Dark Materials, the Philip Pullman Golden Compass series, of course, premieres on HBO. And I just got to say, that extended trailer I've been seeing looks pretty good. That polar bear CGI, pretty damn good. The King is on Netflix. Chalamet, Robert Pattinson, Stan, Collision Course. That's on Friday. It's playing in some theaters ahead of time. We're going to talk about that somehow. Motherless Brooklyn is playing the Edward Norton movie. I'll be talking about that. I don't think you'll be able to get to that. I also am seeing an early screening of Marriage Story on Friday. So we're going to get that early non-spoiler review out. And Apple TV Plus debuts on Friday. First 3 episodes of The Morning Show and Dickinson and C and For All Mankind. We'll be talking about some of those shows at some time. So keep an eye on that. I think overall the reception has been a bit more mixed than people expected, but we're still pretty interested in The Morning Show, at least evaluating that for ourselves. So Apple TV Plus shows in the future, not immediately. And I'm also going to see Terminator Dark Fate because I've seen all the other ones, and I like Mackenzie Davis. So I'll tell you how that went.
Thank you for your service, Dave. Anyways, we're going to wrap up there. SoundCloud.com/NowstalgiaPod. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/NowstalgiaPod. And also NowstalgiaPod on Twitter. We'll catch you next week. Peace out.